Hey, I'm Janel Schalk, and I lead enablement and sales for security at Trace3. Welcome back to Secure Correspondence Season 2. So, usually on the show, we talk about cybersecurity. Calm down before you get upset. We're still talking about cybersecurity in this episode, but today I have Brendan Kelly with me to talk about physical security as a part of cybersecurity. Hey, Brendan.
Hey, Janelle, how are you?
Great. So Brendan serves as a governance risk and compliance consultant for our Trace3 Security Solutions team. Prior to joining Trace3's team, Brendan gained experience from his work in the Marine Corps as an officer. And if you follow him on LinkedIn, you'll have seen his recent news that he passed his CISA exam, the Certified Information Systems Auditor. So congratulations, Brendan, and welcome to Secure Correspondence.
Thanks, Janelle. Excited to be here. And you guys are going to blur my face out for this, I assume, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, want to talk about physical security. And also, if people stick around to the end, we'll do a quick 30-second free way to improve physical security.
Okay, I love it. I'm excited. So traditionally, we think about cyber criminals as shadowy figures sitting behind their computers in dark rooms while wearing hoodies, like that show that's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, whatever it's called. We've seen it in the movies. What was it called?
Mr. Robot.
There you go. That's it. That was an interesting show. I watched a few episodes. I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, but we've seen it in the movies. So, Brendan, tell us, what is the role that physical security plays in today's cybersecurity threat landscape?
So, physical security is still very important in organizational cybersecurity strategies. It often gets overlooked because of the exact reason you mentioned, because of kind of how it's portrayed in Hollywood. So, when we say physical security, people think like the movie Heat with De Niro and like bad guys and ski masks. And it's easy for an organization or business to say, well, I don't have like stacks of gold bricks and I don't have stacks of cash. So like, I don't really need to think about this. But access to your data might still be worth more than gold bullion. So we all know cyber criminals work from non-extradition treaty countries, but there are plenty still operating inside the United States too that can represent a threat from a physical standpoint. And sad to say, some of them may already work for your company because 60% of data breaches are caused by insiders. So when we say physical security, protecting cybersecurity, it's all about limiting access to spaces where your data is stored and access to the tools and information to access that data remotely. Physical security really fundamentally covers the protection of personnel, hardware, software, networks, data from physical actions that could cause damage or loss.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's clear that physical security is a critical piece of overall security, but it's often not managed by the same team that manages cybersecurity. And sometimes those two those two teams might not communicate to each other at all, or might have, just not the greatest of relations, not through anybody's fault. It's just not something that a lot of people put together. So what are ways that you can see these two teams, the physical security and the cybersecurity team, how do they work effectively together? And how can those teams, integrate physical security into holistic cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. So dialogue is always the first step when it comes to teams integrating across an organization. Leadership alignment between physical security and cybersecurity teams is also ideal, but both teams need to understand the big picture and how their roles are codependent. I think cross-training is a great way to integrate teams. So like, do your guards understand why guarding the security room, the server room, is a big deal? Do your IT professionals understand why propping a door open while they're out, bringing in new hardware represents a danger to the secure space? If both teams are communicating and interacting at all levels regularly, you're more likely to get positive outcomes.
Yeah, I love the thinking about the big deals. And I just want to ask, is the main question, do the guards think that Brendan Kelly is a big deal when he walks in the room? But seriously.
If they've met me, they'll very quickly know I'm not a big deal. Although I do happen to be tall. So.
I disagree. But seriously, great advice, Brendan. Can organizations use the same asset inventory and like risk assessments when determining what needs protecting and the levels of controls that need to be put in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're doing your asset inventory, you should be considering physical security too. And so a lot of the frameworks will include those when you actually look at doing risk assessment frameworks and doing control frameworks. When some people say physical security, you think like guns, guards, gates, and locks is kind of the typical one that's thrown out there. But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more options too that can be scaled properly for what's appropriate for your business or organization.
Yeah. I love that guns, guards, gates, and locks. It's too bad that isn't a word that starts with G for locks. It would have been almost as good as dodge, duck, dive, dip, and dodge, right? From Dodgeball movie. So Brendan, you have three main takeaways for security leaders when thinking about their physical security structure. Do you want to dive into those? No dodgeball, pun
Yeah,
intended.
absolutely. I'll dive right in here
Good.
at Global Gym. So the first one is defending everywhere is defending nowhere. So security leaders have to prioritize investments to protect what's most important. They do that a lot, obviously, on the cybersecurity front, but the same thing applies to physical security. So we suggest a layered approach to protecting with physical security as well. Like one big security blanket over the whole company isn't enough. If I told you in 2023 a firewall is all you need to protect your network from hackers, you would never hire me, right? And so the same thing applies in physical security. Why are organizations putting a fob reader at their front door and then no more physical security after that? Conversely, if you make your building into Fort Knox, if you actually plan to have customers visit, it's a waste of money, it's bad for customer experience, and it doesn't make you safer. So really figuring out what matters, pick your strong points, and then protect those is the big first thing. The second thing I'd say is play by monopoly rules. What I mean by that is build evenly, right? You can't build more than houses in a row in Monopoly, right? We're talking about layers, right? How do we filter down access to get close to what matters, right? How do we limit those we trust, and how do we verify those people are actually who they say they are? When I say build evenly, I mean attackers will exploit the weakest part of each security layer. So turn your perspective around and think about how each layer of physical security can be defeated covertly and overtly, right? So think at a perimeter, right? What's your weakest point? Like, so let's look at the server room, which everyone knows they should protect, right, from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Right.
So you got a $2,000 steel door, you got your $200 lock, looks good. But if the door is installed improperly and is not set correctly, and I can open it with a coat hanger, then what's the point, right? That's not building evenly, because the security has not been holistically protected at that layer, right? They're going to find the weak spot. So, right, okay, the door's great. That's good. You've done that correctly. Hey, now let's look up at around the same perimeter, right? Like, let's look up, right? So does that interior wall go all the way to the deck or to the hard ceiling above it? Oftentimes, offices have acoustical ceiling tile. I know we have ours here like that.
Yeah.
Does that wall go all the way up, right? Because, there's about a 1 foot gap there, and it may not be fun to do, but you can go up and over through those gaps. We see it oftentimes a lot with companies that do office remodels or shift office space around. What used to be the break room is now the server room or something like that. And that room they've suddenly moved into was never designed with security in mind, because it was a break room. It didn't matter then, right? So that's when we say build evenly, think Monopoly, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
And the third thing is people are the cornerstone, right? So cornerstone's going to be strong. And let's think of the example of like the bank vault, right? So a bank vault is very tough. That room is very well designed, right? No one gets into or out of the bank vault. But if the person with the combination writes it on the bottom on a post note and puts that underneath their mouse pad, right? The thickness of the door and all that time invested in making that wall really strong doesn't matter, right? So that's how that cornerstone can be your weak point. But people can also be your greatest ally. People consistently outsmart machines. Obviously, AI is super hot right now, and people are talking about AI surveillance systems. But they recently did a test where they had some Marines try to defeat an AI system that was supposed to detect them approaching from far away. And first they beat it by like putting a cardboard box over them and walking up this thing inside of a cardboard box. And then they defeated it by like just doing somersaults, because the AI had never been trained to look for anything besides like people walking and crawling, right? So people are still a really great option when it comes to security. And like how do we...
like coming up with creative ways to test the efficacy of those physical security controls you've got in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
Makes
how do we
sense.
strengthen those people and make that wall, like our people wall, stronger? Right, is the most cost effective way is education. The difference here is when we say education, it's not just click through training; it's actually doing stories, because stories are sticky and they're pretty fast, right? So we've already told some stories in this talk so far, but let's do another quick one, right? So if I want to teach employees about how to keep our perimeter a little stronger, I might talk about how I'd break in the locked front door at an office building, right? And it's not about like kicking the door in. It's as simple as just following someone through, right?
Yeah.
So if I put on a hard hat, an orange safety vest, I have a big box in my hand, and you're walking through the door, Janelle, I'm like, hey, hold the door. Very few people will stop that person because they're like, well, he must belong here. He must be doing work or something. Or what if it was a pregnant woman, right? Both of those examples are examples of what's called piggybacking, where you just follow someone through a door, and again, then the lock doesn't matter anymore. So
Yeah.
people can learn these stories and be more effective, but it takes coaching uh, to help them get there, right? So there's a classical example that teaching people to trust their gut when things don't feel right. So like in New York City in 2010, a street vendor trusted his gut and called the police because something didn't look right with this Nissan Pathfinder. It turned out the car had hundreds of pounds of fertilizer, gas cans, and propane tanks. It was a
Oh my
crudely
gosh.
built car bomb. But he knew to say something because if you live in New York, if you were in the subway, there's 1,000 signs that say like see something, say something, right? So like New
Mhm.
Yorkers have been ingrained to take that action, and the same goes for employees at companies, that they can be taught to learn and take appropriate action, but you got to invest the time and in them to
Yeah.
do it.
So maybe that heightened sense that we get as we go through the airport, where they often say, if you see something, say something too. Applying that to your business and how you train your folks. You don't want them to live, every second of the day being paranoid and trying to freak out. There's balance there, right? But I totally agree with you about training and thinking about stories, because stories are absolutely what resonate. Was there any other points you wanted to add on there, Brendan? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I think that's great. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned multiple times that security is about layers, and we work with a lot of our clients on what we often call defense in depth. And I think that it's clear that physical security is part of that defense in depth and is a really important layer, or potentially multiple layers, around holistic security, which really ties into protecting our data and our systems and our people. So we're all dying to know, what's your free and quick physical security tip?
Okay. I knew we'd forget. Great job. This is super easy. Have all your employees disable text preview on their phones. It's an option under notifications. It might just
Why?
save their marriages.
What?
Um,
Well, besides marriages, why would they want to do that?
So if you disable notifications, right? If I steal your phone, right? Like I get in your office, which probably shouldn't be too hard, right? And your phone's just sitting on your desk while you go to the bathroom or you talk to someone, right? If I swipe your phone and I trigger an MFA code, it will
Mm,
display on your phone if you allow previews, right? So it'll give you the 6-digit code. If you disable that, then you need to unlock the phone to see that MFA code, right? So, and I could get the first part, or maybe I'm doing a password reset is why I'm triggering MFA to get into your account, right? Now I have to know one more thing. Security is all about making it just a little bit harder, right? Adding a little bit more delay. So it's very easy by just disabling that. It's absolutely free. You don't lose any functionality. You just have to unlock your phone to read your messages. But it's great. One more quick bonus one, if you want to go a step beyond that. This is like probably the least known feature, I think, of an Apple phone, is something called lockdown mode. So if you go into your iPhone, you can enable lockdown mode, which basically restricts a few functionalities. And you might have some issue with a few websites. There are some trade-offs to it, but what it really is mitigating is what's called clickless or zero-click attacks, right? So we all know that when you get that weird thing saying your Amazon account has been disabled,
mm,
you shouldn't click on that, right? People have been trained to that part. What people don't know is you can now sometimes get spyware on your phone just by receiving the text message. So by enabling lockdown mode, your phone essentially says no to that type of attack. So right now it's a pretty effective, especially for high risk people. It restricts the amount of information your phone will just naturally share.
Well, okay. Well, I learned something. Brendan, you always have the latest and greatest. Thanks. Thank you so much for joining on the Secure Correspondence. And I love that you said security is all about making things a little bit harder. I don't know if that's the key takeaway here, but I did think it was funny. And thank you so much for joining me today. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions about physical security, you can reach me, Brendan, or the Trace3 security team at security@trace3.com. And remember to tune back in the next episode of Trace3 TV Season 2 for more on all the latest trends on cybersecurity. For now, I'm Janel Schalk, wishing you well and letting you know that Trace3 Security has you covered.